All right.
They had asked Gail to answer some questions, so I don't know if they want her to go first. And then they said police and fire first, and then Matt, you would be up.
Today,
She got up.
somebody was she's clicked this there over here to make it bigger. The percentage on it.
Yeah, I show 5:30 on my clock. A quick here. See, are we city council people?
I think the only one that's not on is Aaron Wiseman.
Well, Aaron's not on yet.
No.
Well, is I think I saw Gail a second ago. Is Gail in the room?
Aaron's on. Aaron's on now.
And Aaron's on. Okay, great. Is Gail in the room?
Yes.
Yes, Gail's here. She's ready to go.
Great. And then is Chief Schrader, someone from the police department, ready on deck?
Yes, got police, fire, public works, and
It's great. Well, then, all right, I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. Ms. Don, you move for attendance purposes.
I have everyone checked in.
Thank you. We requested during our last meeting that Ms. Strope provide a return performance tonight and talk to us a little bit about tenure and rank disparities that may exist across city departments, potential causes and potential fixes for those. So Ms. Strope, fire away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna share a screen here. Hang on, it's loading. It's just gonna be a minute here. That was it.
What? Over to PowerPoint. It's
Okay, can everybody see that? John, can you see that? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Okay, so the question I was asked to take a look at is whether or not, I'm trying to get the mouse to work now. Okay, do the employees, lower pay grade employees make more money than higher pay grade employees? And the question to that is yes, that does happen. It primarily happens in two different ways. The first one is in years of service. So in other words, the longer tenured employees will sometimes make more than employees in higher pay ranges. And then also sometimes happens when we've hired employees above the minimum of the pay range. So this is a look at our current pay ranges. And we kind of talked last week about our pay ranges. And I talked about how our pay ranges are very broad. So we have 28 pay ranges. I'm showing you 7 through 28 on the screen because we don't have any employees actually in the top 6 pay ranges. So I started with pay range 7. Each pay range is 50% from minimum to maximum. So in other words, pay range 8 starts at approximately $30,000. So therefore, then the maximum is 50% higher. So it's about $45,000. And then every pay range, there's 5% difference between the minimum of each pay range. So the minimum of 7, add 5%, that makes the minimum of pay range 8 all the way across. So if you look at them, you can see that all of our pay ranges overlap themselves all the way down. So I'm going to show you a number of examples throughout the city of workforce where we have employees who are making more that work in lower pay ranges than higher pay ranges. And I'm going to start with the police department because that is an area that you guys asked me to look at. So this, you can see the police sergeants. This is all of our police sergeants. And these are all listed in salary order from the lower salary to the highest salary. So you can see 2 police officer 3s there towards the top that are highlighted. They have 15 and 23 years of experience, making more than the police sergeant with 15 years of experience. So, and just to kind of point out too, the 115, the police officer 3 with the 15.2 years of experience, that police officer was actually, when he came in as an officer, came in above the minimum because he had years of experience with another law enforcement agency locally. Then if you look halfway down, there's a couple more police officer 3s, and then just one more down below that, another one. They all have 22, 23, 24 years of experience compared to the 16, 17, 21 years of experience of the sergeants. These are the lieutenants. This is all 5 of our police lieutenants. And you can see that we do have 3 police sergeants making more than 1 lieutenant. And you can see that they have 23 and 24 years of experience compared to the 1 lieutenant with 17 years of experience. Our 3 police captains, we do have 1 lieutenant with 29 years of experience, making, gosh, what, $800 more a year than one of our captains with 22 and a half years of experience. And then just to show you examples throughout the city, because I could show you examples all day long of positions within departments or from department to department. So this is in the fire department. This shows our fire captains, and this is 10 of the 21 fire captains. And just to save space, I don't have them all. The other remaining 11 fire captains make more than that fire driver engineer on the bottom. So you can see we have 2 drivers with 23 years of experience making more than the other captains in there. This is an example in the finance department. We have an accountant that was hired in the last year at the minimum of the pay range 16 at $44,000. But we have a senior accounting technician who's been with the city for almost 28 years. A pay range 12 is making about $10,000 a year more. This is in the Public Works Department in streets. You can see we have equipment operator specialists 1 and 2s, range 12 and 13, and then we have some crew leaders, range 14. But then there's a senior street maintenance worker that's a range 10, quite a bit lower pay range, but they have 29, almost 30 years of experience, and they are making more than all of the others listed above them. Again, in Parks Department, more examples. You have some parks maintenance workers, range 9, with more experience than some range 10s. And then you have some even further down. You can see some park maintenance workers making more than some crew leaders. So their range is 9, and a senior on a range 10 making more than some of the range 14 employees. But then if you look over at their tenure, which is really impressive, I'd like to point out the tenure there, 42 years, 44 years, 41 years of experience with the city, which is really impressive. So like I said, there's lots and lots of examples of this throughout the city that I could go through. And then even more if we compared from department to department. So again, these are the pay ranges. This is the same slide that I showed you earlier that shows all of the pay ranges overlapping. So there's some discussion. So should we have pay ranges that don't overlap? And so just to kind of give you a small visual of what that would look like. This is, I kind of put together to show the ranges. I used the minimum of a range 7 and the maximum of the range 28, and then divided it out equally to the different pay ranges. There would be $6,600 within each range. From the minimum to the maximum of each range would be $6,600. So what does that look like? This is, when it switches here, I'm hoping you guys can see the dots on there. They're not real dark, but this is just, I just took the range 14. And if you look down kind of on the left side, you see all the dots between 40 and 50, almost $55,000. Those would be the current salaries of all of our employees in a range 14. But then if you look over on the far side on the bottom, if we went to that equal pay ranges where none of them overlap, this range would suddenly go from like 75 to 83,000, or 70,000, 75,000 to 83,000. So all of those employees, those range 14 employees, would have to be moved up into that new pay range. So it would be a huge impact to try to go to ranges that don't overlap, so that you don't ever have employees in a lower pay range making more than employees in a higher pay range. So just to kind of go back through, these are a couple of slides that I thought I would show you from last week. This shows our full-time employees, and you can see, remember, we have about 34% with less than 5 years or less experience, about 14% with 5 to 10 years of experience, about 27% with 10 to 20 years, and then about 18% 20 to 30 years, and 3% 30 years or more. So, you know, we do have a number of employees in that 20 plus years of experience that hopefully those employees are all fairly well through their pay ranges. A lot of it depends on if they've moved up during those years or if they've kind of stayed in some of the same pay ranges, how far through the pay range they would be. But that definitely impacts where they fall compared to their peers in other pay ranges. And then again, going back to the Austin Peters study that we talked about, this slide also showed last week. And if you remember, the first 2 recommendations that Austin Peters gave to us last year, we did do, and I'm sorry, they gave to us in 2016 and 17. We did implement the top 2 in April of 2017. The compression pay adjustment, we did not implement. And then the bottom, the adjusting the pay ranges annually according to an index. We have adjusted the pay ranges annually since then, but we haven't done it to an index. So I was kind of asked to give some type of a recommendation. And, you know, my recommendation would be that we look at trying to establish some type of a plan that we can stick to for adjusting our pay ranges annually according to an index, as well as merit increases of moving our employees through the pay ranges each year. So does anybody have any questions that answer the questions you guys were looking for?
Thank you. Any members of the committee have any questions? Gail, I have a question just to make sure that I understood what you were presenting there correctly. And I tried to track it, but just to make sure. You know, there seemed to be plenty of examples of differences in pay for rank and pay range, but I don't think I saw any examples where there were disparities that involved both tenure and rank. So where someone of a lower rank with fewer years of service was making more than someone of a higher rank with more years of service. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. I didn't find examples of that. For example, I did look through where I showed you with the police positions, because I know that's, I say that only because that's specifically one that you guys asked about. I listed all of the sergeant positions, all of the lieutenant positions, and all of the captain positions, and then showed the others respectively within them to where we, so I mean, there weren't other ones.
So,
Go ahead.
I'm wondering, do you know how typical is that to have just a 5% difference in beginning of ranges, and also the degree of overlap that we have? How is that typical?
It's not atypical. I'll tell you that not every organization has that broad of ranges. We're very lucky to have the 50% broad ranges. That's, in my opinion, that's what we want. That's something that the city has always striven to do, because we really don't want our employees to be topped out. If our employees are topped out, they're not going to get pay increases. So we want very broad ranges so that employees can come in, they can work for us for 30 years and continue to get pay increases. So in my opinion, that's a real strength of our pay plan. What it does do is it does have then employees in lower pay ranges making more than some of those in higher pay ranges with less tenure.
Thank you. Any other questions? So Gail, can I ask one more favor of you?
Sure.
It seems that there's some disagreement, or for lack of a better word, disagreement between you know, your examination of salaries and ranges and experience, and then the presentation that was provided to us that was just about salaries within the police department. Would you mind taking a look at that other presentation and seeing if you can determine for us if there is another way to analyze or understand that information that might make this disagreement make sense to us?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thanks again for presenting again tonight. I know this is where we've already asked almost triple of you than you would normally provide, and now I've lopped on another favor to ask. But anyone else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I could ask Gail just two questions. One, Gail, could you go back to the last slide that you were just showing? Sure. As related to the compression cost?
That was back then.
Right there. Yeah, so that was $307,000, and that was for 255 employees. And keep in mind, that was in 2017. So that was based on the workforce and the salaries at that time.
Okay. I'm sure I was on the council then. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this question, but what's the reason why we didn't start to move towards these pay adjustments back then?
Council just didn't, we talked about several options and council just didn't do it then. So yeah, I really can't answer much better than that, sorry.
So I just hope, Mr. Chair, that, and Steve, you're absolutely correct. So if we're just going to continue to kick the can down the road, then we're just going to just continue having a conversation. So hopefully we can get something out of this budget this year, and we can stop just conversating and put some actions to work. That's all.
Could
Thank
we,
you, Graham.
could we copy of the slides?
Sure.
Hey, John, this is Steve. Can I say something here?
Please.
Right. So, from my point of view, kind of like Gail said, that there's some advantages to our pay plan the way it is. From my view, it's not a structural issue with the plan, but maintaining that plan. How we adjust that over time, and there's different things that go on. And in the past year, the last couple of years, we've just been doing the 2% across the board, which is, not the most effective way, at least in my opinion, of being able to adjust that plan. But that's kind of what we've done over the last couple of years. So I don't see it as a structural issue necessarily with the plan, but more how it gets implemented and changed over the years.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments on this topic before we move on? Okey doke. Next on the agenda is the presentation of the police department's budget. Just to make you all, okay, I'm losing video image sort of intermittently of various members on this call. So I just regained my view of the room.
You want that around the side? Yeah. Or just around the corner. That's easier for that. I don't know. That's fine.
Good evening, Chief.
Evening.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Great.
It's a little wet outside.
Begin when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. First, let me introduce Bethany Bendworth. She's our management analyst, and Bethany's been here several years now, so she's playing a very integral part in our budget management and preparation. So I may turn to her at any point in time and ask her a question or have her answer your questions. She knows the budget as well as anyone in the city. So Beth is here to help me. As a summary, we have 5 budgets. The largest by far is the police general fund budget. We also have an animal control budget, a 911 center budget, school resource officer, and Mustang. Those 5 budgets amount to approximately $11 million that we manage. As we looked at this year's line items, there were very few adjustments. I mean, maybe significance overused, but I didn't see anything that really was significantly changed from last year to this year, and then what we requested, and then what is recommended. So I really don't have any comments, but we certainly are prepared to answer questions if anyone would like to delve into the line items themselves. It's pretty much a status quo budget.
Okay, well, are there any questions at the outset before they begin hitting any notable highlights throughout their 5 budgets?
So it looks like the overtime budget is going to be quite a bit more this year than proposed. And I see it's even for the current budget, what's approved in the mayor's budget is even less than last year. Have any ideas about getting a handle on the overtime? It doesn't seem realistic that the way it's going, that's going to work out.
Did he say this?
No, I
Overtime.
yeah, it for the overtime, I think that it decreased here and it increased somewhere else in SRO, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Does that sound right?
That is, yes.
So just kind of a trade-off with some of the, well, you answer that. Sorry.
Well, we implemented that budget in 2019, I believe. Well, we implemented the expenses, the operational expenses for that.
The schools pay for part of the SRO, and I think this budget is more of an accurate reflection of what, at least for the upcoming year, if I understand that right, Roger. So there was just some trade-off in the overtime.
Yes, I mean,
So overall,
yes, moving some money
yes,
around
yeah,
between those two budgets.
right.
Because we have 8 officers assigned to the SRO budget, and so to make it more equitable and responsive to the needs of the respective budgets, there were some adjustments made. In general, overtime is very difficult to anticipate. We don't know what type of critical incidents we'll have from one year to the next, so we do our best at managing. What we call schedule adjust. In other words, if it's within the same work cycle, we will send officers, or particularly officers, because they generate the most overtime, we'll send them home toward the end of that work cycle. That saves a lot of money. There's, I think, thousands of hours, I don't have the exact number at my fingertips, that we save by schedule adjusting. By saying, okay, you've generated so many hours of overtime already in this work cycle, so we want you to take this day off, or take off 4 hours early, or something of that nature. So even though you see those overtime hours and that overtime money, if not for our management of it and the manner that we manage it, it would be much, much higher.
I'd also like to mention, and Roger, you can add to this if you want, but as a virtue of being the capital city, there are a lot of events that go on that we have to end up staffing for, not only with police, but other services as well, for which we don't really charge anything. Some of them you wouldn't expect to be able to, and then some of them are planned events, a parade, for example, or something like that. So that certainly adds a lot challenge, not only to overtime and regular salary, but also to the management end of things.
Right, as the state capital, we always have protests and demonstrations, things that are that require a lot of personnel. We have a lot of parades in our town for which we don't charge. That costs us a lot of overtime. We can't time these out as to when in a work cycle a certain critical incident will occur. If, for instance, we have several very serious matters that could all happen toward the end of the work cycle, so we don't have time to adjust personnel's hours, and there's just it takes a long, in-depth analysis to really discuss with some degree of accuracy over time. We do the best we can. I think we do a good job.
No, I understand. I know it's difficult. I just was thinking about wanting it to be as realistic as possible, looking at the past years and how expensive it's been. I'm new to this, so I just had one other question.
It's included in that.
The, you have the DARE program. I just was wondering why it's here and maybe not in the school resource officers. It just seems like that would be where it would be. Is there something that I don't, like I said, I'm new to this.
The DARE program. Why isn't there SRO City Channel? That's what his question is.
I think if I understand the question, they're segregated because the school system pays for half of the SRO program. So it has an independent segregated budget for those 8 officers plus a sergeant. The school system pays 50% of all their expenses. And then I also want to add that when you look at the overtime, you'll also see, without being able to identify specifically, but tens of thousands of dollars of grant money that's included in that overtime, those overtime figures.
In the actual amounts.
In the actual amounts.
Okay, and the schools aren't willing to pay for part of the DARE program. I mean, it seems like it's mainly in the schools.
Well, the DARE program is a part of the SRO program. It's not a standalone like it used to be, but we have, if there's a DARE program, it's in the SRO program, and we have our officers that are cross-trained.
And oftentimes donations are included.
And we also have donations for that purpose. But DARE is SRO and vice versa.
You can ask him.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
And this is just for, I guess, just for my clarification. Chief, whenever we have like a home football game, like the Jeff City Jays, and now, are those officers, I'm pretty sure they're on overtime. Is that part of the 50% that we receive from the school, or is that just overtime for the how many officers that we have out there?
That is part of the school program. So they're paid 50% of their salary for those duties is paid by the school system.
So the officers who are out there doing the football games are just the SROs?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for that clarity. And I do have some questions about, I guess, your pink sheet items. It looks like you have a request for 16 vehicles and 1 police trainee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in your budget as it relates to the sales tax that we're currently in there for police or public safety, should I say?
It cut out.
Got 4 cars in there.
I think I missed a word or two in your question. I'm sorry.
What amounts do you have available out of this current sales tax that can be utilized for vehicles or vehicles?
Well, I'm sorry, that'll take kind of a lengthy explanation. I think it was last September, distributed to the council a list of our needs at that point in time. I know that's a very fluid list, and it changes, prices change, but we wanted to point out that sales tax G monies that had been allocated to the police department for the entire 5-year period was approximately $900,000 short of our needs. And that was after we subtracted $7.7 million to renovate the police department building. So we took our needs, subtracted the $7.7 million for building renovations, and we were still short approximately $900,000. So that included 0 cars. No cars were included in those needs. That was all different types of technology and equipment and things of that nature. So I know the cars that have been tentatively approved or recommended to be approved has been identified as being paid for through sales tax G money, but that was not our anticipated part of our anticipated plan. So that reduced the amount of money we have available for those other needs by approximately $175,000. So we're now about $1.1 million short for those other needs if we buy cars from sales tax G.
Okay.
Clear as mud?
Clear as
Hi, Chief, or maybe even Ms. Mueller. How many vehicles did we purchase last year?
Six.
And where did we get those funds? Does anybody remember?
Sales tax.
Sales tax.
Yes.
We think sales tax also.
Okay. How many vehicles do you guys have on the fleet total?
50 some, I think.
50 vehicles?
Yeah, motorcycles, emergency response vehicle, the Bearcat, animal shelter. There's a lot of different types of vehicles with different purposes.
How many?
If I might, as part of our presentation, when I said the line items, anything too dramatic, any dramatic changes, we were going to talk about the pink sheets. So the cars were first up, and if I might, as a prelude to this, I think for the last 3 years, we said based on the number of cars the council allows us, we can predict how many cars we'll request the following year. And if you recall last year, when those 6 were approved, we said that we would request 15 cars this year. And that is what we requested. The 16th car was totaled in a traffic crash. So that's a little bit misleading, but given mileage on these cars, we can predict out several years what our needs are going to be.
Thank you, Chief. I know last year we talked about the drug forfeiture fund and the evidence funds. Do you have an idea of what you'll be using those for this year?
Well, we don't have necessarily, we like to leave our options open, flexibility to purchase things, for instance, things that maybe on that list that we won't be able to purchase now with half-cent sales tax money. It's not an endless supply, but I think there's a certain amount that would allow us some options anyway. I think we purchased vests this past year.
The vest and the canine.
And then the canine were 2 items this past year, we utilizing those monies. And the vest is an ongoing need also.
Are those things that you anticipate? I'm sorry if somebody else is trying to speak. I'm sort of hogging this. Is that an expense you anticipate using that for? It looks like I show about $240,000 you have in those 2 funds.
It's too far.
No, sure. We did the evidence funds.
Yeah, she's talking about both.
I have to check because I wasn't aware that it would be that high.
I believe the evidence funds are for payouts to.
They are.
For victims. They're not for,
Yeah,
the evidence
okay.
funds are not for us to be using. They're for court payouts.
That's what we like give to the school system on order of the court.
Yes.
So the court orders those monies periodically to be paid to the school system, and so we have to exclude the evidence funds, that amount, and that leaves us a little over 100,000, which is what I thought we had.
Yes.
So for the evidence funds, can we use them for anything else, like our salaries for the resource officers, like our portion of that, or anything else in our budget, or is that exclusively for, like, the judge has to release that?
Yes, the latter. The judge orders us to issue a check for a certain amount periodically to the school system, and that's what it's for. We don't have the option of spending that money.
Is that something Ryan deals with on a regular occasion, like petitions the court for, or is that something that each of those bodies will petition the court for?
Yeah, Ryan isn't, and quite frankly, I'm not involved in that loop myself. All I know is that we receive orders from the court. I don't know who initiates those orders, if that's the prosecutor's office or someone like that. I mean, that would be a good guess, because I don't think we do. We just retain the money for that purpose.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes. Ward.
I remember there was a discussion regarding the radio tower out west of town. I believe it was for 15,000, and it wasn't part of the pink sheet last budget. I was just making sure that that tower did get installed or fixed or boosted.
It was, yes, it was erected.
Okay, and it's working out well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then also on, there's a line item for a $13,000 increase for software license and maintenance. What is that increase for? What software?
Beth will be able to tell you here shortly.
That's fine. It's 545010.
Okay, I'm assuming that is in the police fund that you're looking at.
Yes.
Because we have a couple of those line items throughout in communications and so forth. So that is actually the items that are paid for in that line item. Tyler Technologies is one that's split between police and communications. Then the other items is a professional standard software, and then an asset management software, and the asset management software is actually new. So it's kind of a combination of all of those, the major part of that being the asset management piece of it. The other amounts just simply going up due to the annual maintenance.
What does the asset software do?
It does all kinds of stuff, actually. It was just implemented, or it's being implemented now. So it's basically a barcode system. So you're able to, instead of using a ton of Excel sheets for issuing equipment, items, large items that may come into the department, such as equipping a vehicle, all of that information is logged into the system. And it also keeps
like an inventory software package? Okay. Was that a budget item last year?
Was that a what?
A budget? Was that budgeted last year?
No, it was not. It's been an ongoing need for many years. I think before I even came into this position, it was something that I know the department had wanted to implement, just being able to get a bunch of people on board and find a system that fits the need for the police department.
Accountability is important with that. It allows us to track we have thousands of pieces of equipment and property and things that are assigned to various people and for various things. And so this is a new technology that we have that allows us to track every piece of equipment back to someone who's responsible for that piece of equipment. We've never had that ability before. It was all handwritten and not very efficient and quite frankly, not very effective either. So this allows us to do those things.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee?
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Chief, I know that in past years, the pink sheet request, or I think maybe a year or so ago at the Public Safety Committee, presented a very lengthy list of capital needs, and it was multiple pages. And I know that the vehicles have risen to the top, and I get asked this question, I know other council colleagues do as well from time to time, about body worn cameras. And at one point, you all created a cost estimate, I think, of about $400,000 for that particular line item to implement. And I know that there's a debate that could exist about, usefulness and how reliable and all of those things. But is your estimate of $400,000 from a couple of years ago still, you think, kind of where it would be, or are we talking a higher amount of money? I've just been asked about it again recently. I know some other council members have. And I guess I always have my eye on whether or not something like this becomes a statewide requirement ever, and that we have to implement it. And then my follow-up would be, are you aware of any potential funding sources that could exist for something like that if we're faced with implementing body cameras within the city?
As far as their use, the price, I think, is a pretty valid one, or best estimate that we have. And I say that not because we've updated our own personal research, but rather as I read materials about other police departments and the associated costs they've assumed with those body cameras, and particularly the data retention. If you look at the relativity of it, depending on how large those departments are and what it costs them, we're right there. A department our size at $400,000 seems to match what other departments are spending per officer. So I think we're at least in the ballpark as far as that $400,000. Funding sources, I'm not immediately aware of other funding sources besides just local support. And then finally, I would say that I think the impression is generally perpetrated by many is that that's the end all and that's the answer to everything. And it really, having attended several training programs, all I'll say is, yes, it can be beneficial in some cases and absolutely worthless in others. What you get if an arm is brought up, you'll obscure the view because your hands are in between you and the camera and the object of your attention. If you're running, you'll get this on the camera. If you're grappling with someone, you'll get this and you'll see nothing. So I also do not know of any case law, which shocks me because I thought now several years down the road, we would have some guidance through the courts as to what they would accept and what privacy issues would be resolved by the courts. And I've read nothing. So I quite frankly think in the last 5 years, little has changed as far as expense, as far as the validity of having them, and as far as guidance from the court system. So what we told you, you're absolutely right in your summary of that presentation and what we said, very accurate, and I don't think anything has changed.
Okay. And then I know within the last few years, Cole County Sheriff's Department has implemented, I believe, and I believe LUPD has also implemented. I guess I'm not certain how they funded that without, maybe their departments are more flush with cash. I have a tendency to look at the list of capital needs. We already talked about salary issues. And I mean, I'm in my 8th year on the council, and I don't think any of us have really figured out. We keep trying to get more out of the revenue that we do have. I guess this is just more of a statement, but I do have long-term concern about how we continue to fund our basic operations as a city without new revenue sources. And you are correct. And I know that your department continues to push vehicles as far as they can go. And I tend to believe we as a council do the best we can to fund what we can when it comes to vehicles. But we're at a point where there's just not wiggle room, in a lot of ways. It's almost like we're trying to patch up a police car so that we can buy a new, public works truck that's 30 years old. And then we've got to then replace the police car that's 100,000 miles over what it needs to be. I don't have a good answer, and other than new funding and new revenue. And so I do appreciate both you and fire, I believe, continue to do a good job of at least outlining your long-term capital needs and what it costs for those things, and certainly staying on top of that. I just wish that we had more funds to work with to provide in that regard. So
I would say that that at least one of those two departments does have other funding sources, and the other one is very small. So it's difficult to compare. It's just not apples to apples. So they have additional funds that we don't have, and they're much smaller. The majority of the sheriff's office is directed to the jail, the management of the jail, and the civil side. So if you look at their actual numbers of deputies who patrol the county, we're much, much larger. So of course their expenses would be much less in terms of cameras. If I could segue then into the cars before we may move on, and maybe not, but I wanted to at least notice the council that the cars, we're using April mileage figures, but the cars that we will, 180 some thousand miles for the 5 cars that we may replace if that's eventually what the council allows us to do. Next year, the 20 vehicles will have approximately 154,000 miles on them. The ones this year will have in April of 21, 156,000. And the 20 that will request, the price just keeps going up. We'll need 20 next year that will have almost 3 times what had been considered a reasonable number of miles on them. And there were, 150? Is that the 156 for those 20?
Yes.
With the price of $42,000 this year, obviously is $840,000 expense for requests next year. And it just keeps going up and up. Now, I don't have the solution, but I just, again, advise the council, it's not going to get any better. We'll have 20 cars next year that will need replacing. I'm sorry.
Well, the details about the law enforcement tax that the voters of the county approved years ago to construct the jail and fund it, we're not able to access any of that for our services, are we? Is that all strictly tied to the county and the county commission's discretion, or right now?
Well, the answer is presently that's correct. But who knows what can be negotiated at some point in time. I personally think some people were confused and they thought law enforcement within the county, not simply county law enforcement. And if you look at that referendum, it could easily confuse a voter. And, that's what frustrates me is I think many thought that we would be a part of that tax, and we've not been any part of that tax.
Yeah, sometimes we have to remind folks that the city of Jefferson also resides in Polk County. So,
yes.
Can I just add something on the vehicles? I think it was about 4 years or so ago, we did a fairly in-depth look at the vehicle needs the city and what was coming. And so we have a pretty good idea every year of some of those needs. And so this is something that we've been talking about and certainly have indicated the need as coming.
And I don't want to belabor it, but we also remember the mileage does not include idling miles. And the closest I can find, if we throw an educated dart, would be about 22 miles an hour of idling time. And this is police idling. So if we're at a traffic crash for 2 hours, we idle for those 2 hours. There's a lot of idling time in our profession. So that mileage is on the way low end of what is actually the stress that's actually being placed on those engines.
Mr. Chair, one more thing to ask, please.
Councilman Graham?
And this is for our 2 new council members who may see only a pink item sheet and see that there is a request for 16 new vehicles and may not really understand. They may just see that we're just purchasing vehicles so that we can have this pretty shiny new car just rolling through the city of Jefferson. So Chief, if you could, in 2 minutes, explain the importance of these vehicles as it relates to the officers, their work and their work environment and those things to our new council members.
What we say is that is their office. They spend a portion, and that varies of 10 hours each duty day inside of those vehicles. Those vehicles will carry them from point A to point B many times in an emergency situation, which puts stress on those vehicles and stress on our officers. And they have to, as we say in the academy, they learn what's your first obligation to arrive safely. They have to be able to get from point A to point B quickly and safely. They depend on those vehicles to do that. They carry all of their equipment that they could possibly need within reason. I'm not talking about special weapons, tactics types of things, but your zone officers, those things are inside that vehicle. It's hard to relate, I think, the seriousness of this if you don't spend your time in those patrol cars. And it's not intended to escape the question. It's just when you climb in them and you go to emergency calls, you quickly see that you really rely on them to carry you, your means of taking you from point A to point B. And if you can't rely on those vehicles, if you can't rely on those cars to do that, our option is really to down those cars. I mean, I just can't allow those officers to drive vehicles that are unsafe. Is that, Councilman Graham, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, sir. I just for the new council members to really understand that it's not about a shiny new car coming down the street. It's about the officers, that's their work environment and the safety and the response to the Jefferson. And I do recall a couple of weeks ago an officer making a stop and the brakes went out on the vehicle. Very, very, very unsafe. So that is their just like how we who work expect for our environment to be safe. They expect and should also get the same thing. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and I know that we compare our cars to the highway patrol. Let's just say, relatively speaking, they down their cars at 50,000 miles. Well, that has changed. They're now up to the total of 64,000 miles. 64,000 now. They changed since last year. Those are highway miles too. Now, I'm not minimizing the seriousness, the needs the highway patrol has, but a lot of those miles are put on as highway miles. And of course, they do have emergency driving also. But when we have cars that, you know, it hasn't been so many years ago that we had a 3-year program. Every third year, every year we would replace 9 cars. We had assigned 27 to the patrol section, to the operations division. None of those cars ever had more than 90,000 miles. And how we've digressed in the matter of 5 years to 156,000 miles. It's just shocking to me how that has happened, but it's with that we're faced, and I just plead to you to give us every consideration, because as I said, the request will be 20 next year.
Chief, the vehicle that was totaled, do you know did we receive any insurance proceeds from that?
I think so. Ryan may know.
I'm sorry.
Did we get money for the total car from insurance?
We're still working for, I think we've only gotten 1 or 2 checks out of those.
But the one that I won't name the officer, but he totaled his car.
We did receive reimbursement for that.
Okay. Now, I don't.
Do we know how much?
That Margie has the money, I think.
Offhand, I would say it was around 12 or 13,000, but I would have to check for sure.
Okay. Do you know where that was deposited?
Into the general fund.
The general fund. Okay. Well, Chief, I know when you started your remarks tonight, we just sort of led right in with questions. I didn't know if you had if we had knocked you off a scheduled presentation plan, or if you wanted to continue on with any sort of structured remarks that you might have had.
I prefer questions. That's how I know what you're interested in, or what clarity you need. So I was just going to go down the pink sheets quickly, and we've talked about the vehicles to some extent. The police officer, just like last year, we were going to assign him to the CAT team, which is our community policing team. They solve neighborhood problems, and if we have a particular concentration of crime in a particular neighborhood, they'll go into that neighborhood and take care of the problem. So that was the intent of that position. If we move down to other pink sheets, we wanted 2 part-time people for our animal control program real quick, and that I can say we asked for 2 20-hour people so to avoid paying benefits, and that's the cheapest route we could go. And then I was just going to point out that last year in 2019 we had over 16,500 visitors to our animal shelter, so it's real important to have someone receiving those 16,500 visitors and directing them to the proper place, and not requiring our animal control officers to serve that purpose. And the other pink sheet was communications operator. And again, I offer each of you the opportunity to come and watch them work in the 911 center. That's the best that I can say, or the best argument I can make for another operator, is to just watch them multitask. I cannot believe how fortunate we are to have the 20 people there. But I've wanted a 21st person so that we could have 3 7-person teams for at least 15 years. And what happens is that one team that only has 6, what happens, the supervisor is required to basically work a console and not be a supervisor. We just don't have enough people. So we can go into the hundreds of thousands of phone calls and activities and things that are all begin and end in the 911 center. The tornado was a great example of thousands of calls within a few hours. I don't know, Captain Heisen probably could tell me, but that's kind of a quick rundown. 90% of our budget is personnel. And so when you look at our pink sheets, that's how we deliver the service, and that's what we're requesting. Thank you.
Okay. Now, is 911 center, are you fully staffed to 20 folks?
No, we haven't been for a couple of years. I've said for a long time, that's the hardest position to fill, to get somebody to go down to a 911 center without windows, talk to sometimes unkind people, and And multitask, it's not doing 2 or 3 tasks. It could be doing 7 or 8 different tasks at one time. It's very difficult to find the right person to do that. I will not put someone there just because they applied. So we've had a vacancy for about 3 years now, and we hired one, so we still have a vacancy as we speak. So we're working with 18, I believe. Captain, are they all trained now except for the new one?
Yes.
I think we have 18 trained operators. That counts 3 supervisors.
Any questions from the committee? Well, Chief, I'll just ask you for a comment. I'm sure you're aware of the presentation that has been provided by the Fraternal Order of Police about their salary concerns. Do you have any opinion or general remarks you'd like to make on that topic?
Sure. First of all, I support their presentation. I know I support it for specific reasons. One is I know how much work they committed to that, how much research. I know how serious they are about it. I know how committed they are to this city. They want to work in Jefferson City. They don't want to leave. They don't want to go to another city because they can make $15,000 a year more to start after they're here 5, 6, 7 years. They want to work here. They want to serve this community. And I believe that their figures are valid. Their intent is valid. They're very serious about this. I am so proud of them because, and not just sworn people, but the non-sworn people, I wish our community knew the level of professionalism and conscientious dedication that we have in that police department. And I just ask you that when they speak, that you listen, because they're individuals that you can trust. You may not have an obvious route to the end that they're seeking. I get that, but I'm just saying that they're very sincere about this, and they're not going to mislead you, certainly not intentionally.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for those comments. Is that Councilman Graham? Or wait, who did I just cut off? Any comments? Yeah, Councilwoman Weiss.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to go back to the asset management software. Excuse my dog, he wants to talk. The asset management software, there was I thought I was listening, but I thought I heard some things, but I'd kind of like you to repeat them maybe. Did you say that was not a budgeted item for this current fiscal year, but it is being implemented already?
With the asset management one, yes, that was something new that we had implemented. Use some project management with the sales tax funding. And what is scheduled would be the maintenance for it.
So I think what Beth is saying is we are allocated so many sales tax dollars each year, and it was from those dollars that we felt this was a priority, that we could accomplish something that we've been trying to do since I've arrived, and have done it in a haphazard manner. And so now we have a kind of a professional way of keeping track of all our assets, to whom they're assigned, so that when they're issued, we know to whom they're issued, when they're turned in, we know if they've turned everything in. And literally, I think I said thousands of pieces of equipment. And when you talk about uniforms and equipment and everything, that would be, I don't have the specific number, obviously, but it's a mountainous task. And you know, so that's what we decided to do with some of our sales tax money too.
Okay, do you know what the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you know what the maintenance cost for that is on a yearly basis? And is that just this year, or is that every year after?
So the maintenance on that, that is, I believe it came in just a little under 6,000. And that would be the ongoing maintenance, the license, hardware coverage on it, all of that. And that would be ongoing, like most maintenance. I'm sure it will change from year to year. That's something that we go and we look at and evaluate every year. Like I noted, the other items in that list that I have said before, we have Tyler Technologies. That's a huge chunk of it at 52.6, and that is actually split between communications as well. So that's also a big piece of what is in that account also.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I just wanted to, it seems clear from the Fraternal Order of Police presentation to address those salary issues, it's going to take a significant amount of money just to begin that. And to me, that's going to require some new revenue. So do you have any ideas about that?
Well, no, I don't have, I'm kind of not empowered to address the revenue sources, I guess.
Well, I think there are some discussions, and Carrie, I don't know that this is the place to talk about it or not, but there are some thoughts and discussions and opportunities at least to talk about some revenue increases.
Those are some possibilities, Steve, and I don't know if tonight would make sense to really get into them, probably not, but also, and I can't remember, I might have outlined a couple in my budget letter, but perhaps there may be some other options that I think could be looked at for big picture. So I think that would definitely be worth a discussion here in the near future.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll get through the rest of our planned agenda for this evening, and that our next meeting will be just a council discussion on the 20th. I think that would be a great thing to begin our conversation with on the 20th, if that's possible. All right. Any other questions from the committee?
I just, a couple of questions about the school resource officers. How many officers are there?
8.
8?
Yes, sir.
And I really don't know. So what kind of things do they do? I just really don't know.
We instruct, we mentor, we work at special events. One purpose is not to enforce the law. Now, if the laws are broken in our presence, or there's a matter that requires a police involvement, then they will take on the enforcement responsibilities. But that is not why we're in the schools, and we develop relationships with those young people. I'm sorry, I don't think this venue is really maybe where I should give certain examples, given the nature of the examples, but I can tell you that crimes and very serious crimes are solved, evidence is retrieved, police responsibilities are rewarded with those relationships. Kids come to know our officers as human beings, as people, as individuals, not as somebody just wearing a uniform that's there to enforce the law. And so outside of that school environment or inside, it's really neat to watch the kids interact with those officers, because they do very little enforcement. They're there just to establish rapport, relationships, and confidence, mutual respect.
And is there one assigned to each of the high schools full time? How's that work?
There were 2 in the high school, and now there'll be 1 in, or is 1 in each of the 2 high schools.
Okay. Okay.
And then we have 1 in each of the middle schools.
Okay.
And,
So it's 4.
yeah, JCAC has 1. We have some that kind of rotate around the middle or the elementary schools. We hit all the public schools.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the committee? Chief, do you have any other closing remarks?
No, thank you for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda will be Chief Schofield presenting the fire department budget.
Thank you. Do it again. Thanks.
Well, Chief, if you can hear me, our screen's been taken over with your budget, so I can't see you anymore. But whenever you are ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I am ready to proceed. And so my thought would be that we would just call your attention there to the master budget book. And I think that is page maybe 136, 127. And we'll just kind of scroll through that real quick to start things off. So the overview is there, and really not much has changed in that capacity. And we'll kind of proceed to the next page, which will take us to the performance measures. And I'll just mention that when it comes to performance measures, we discuss those as a department twice a year. I have departmental meetings once in the winter and then once in the summer. Actually, I have them coming up next week. And we go over all these different performance measures, and we talk about the different things that those measures impact. And we spend a lot of time kind of indoctrinating new people and talking to them about why that matters and why we measure those things. Not a lot of significance to most of those items that I would call your attention to now, other than just to say that, time is of the essence for us. And so we spend a lot of time talking about response times, turnout times, dispatch times, all of those things, because we know how quickly fire does grow in the fire environment. We also know that when we're dealing with patients, whether that be an injury accident or a medical emergency, we know that time is of the essence there as well. So we spend a lot of time working through how we can make ourselves respond more quickly, more efficiently, safely, all those things, in addition to providing excellent service once we arrive on scene. So we can kind of continue to scroll down there, and we'll look at the next little bit there on the performance measures. We did see so far this year, these numbers were produced for the mid-year point, which I think is May 1st, if I recall correctly. You'll notice that there are some that are down a little bit, and that is partially due to the changing environment in which we work in the COVID world. That specifically, probably one of the most notable is the number of public education fire prevention events. We focus a lot on fire prevention. It's a major priority for us. And I would introduce you to a new term maybe for some of you, which is community risk reduction. And that's something that really is all encompassing when we talk about fire prevention, as well as other things that include inspections and investigations and all the different public media campaigns and things like that. So community risk reduction is a major thing for us, and that was hampered pretty severely as of March, April, maybe even February a little bit when COVID really hit. And so we're trying to find our way through that. We're continuing to look at how we're going to deliver Fire Prevention Month in October of this year, and we're going to give the schools a little bit of time to kind of get their there's sea legs underneath them, and then we'll start working with them on how we do that in October. So happy to answer any questions on the performance measures, anything that you would like me to dive a little deeper on.
Any questions from the committee? All right, Chief, please proceed.
Okay, and so as far as our goals and changes and initiatives, we really try to keep it simple. And we just say that, we can summarize all that in our motto and just say that we serve people, we shield property, save lives. And that's really our intent, and everything that we do really kind of supports that mission or that motto. So if there are no other questions, then we'll jump into pink sheets. And I'll just kind of say from the onset, as we kind of scroll down there, maybe a little bit further to the summary page for the pink sheets. These 13 items, you could almost say that's a 13-way tie for number one. And I'm always forced to prioritize them. And I do that about 4 or 5 times, and then I just kind of give up. And I said, well, it's impossible for me really to prioritize a lot of these items, because each one of them touches, so many other things. And I would just say that, yes, I put a prioritization in there, but in reality, they are all important. And as Councilman Hensley, you mentioned, or I believe it might have been Councilman Hussey mentioned earlier, the capital concerns and the capital issues, and kind of the long-term, what is it represented in these pink sheet items. There are significant infrastructure items in there. And at some point we've got to be able to make some progress on these items. And one of those I would bring to your attention would be the Hyde Park burn building. And for those of you that have been around for that discussion in the past, there is the three structures, if you want to think of it, although 2 of them are connected at Hyde Park at our training center. There's the classroom building that has the reserve apparatus in there, and that is, for the most part, in good shape and doesn't need much attention. But then out on the apron there, we call that the training ground. There are 2 buildings there. One is the drill tower and one is the burn building. They're connected. And when we say burn building, what we really mean is there's a burn room, just one room in which we can burn in. And that structure was built about 25 years ago, and has seen a lot of very hard use over the years, and is failing. And to the point that structurally there are major concerns, and the burn room has been decommissioned. That happened. A structural engineer took a look at it back in 2017 and said, you are not compliant with best practice, not only best practice, but minimal standards. And so NFPA standard 1403 governs everything we do in live fire, and it's very strict, and it's very specific as to what has to be in place to do live fire training. And so we have not done live fire training since 2017 in the burn room at Hyde Park, but we have tried to creatively find ways to still do training. And one of those things, if you go down there now, you'll see 2 shipping containers that are connected. And we use those shipping containers to do some of our live fire training, albeit still not ideal. It was meant to be a Band-Aid at best for a very short time. But we need to take a look at that burn building, not just to rebuild what we had 25 years ago, but to look to the future of something that is viable for us for the next 25 years. So the number that is in that pink sheet request is a conservative number. It's right around $500,000. But as I mentioned in previous presentations in this budget process, previous years, there are multi-million-dollar facilities across the state, and somewhere in the range of $7 to $8+ million facilities. Joplin is probably a good example. I think I brought up a couple of years ago, and they have a state-of-the-art facility, and not only do they use it, but they are a host to regional delivery for training, statewide training. And so at one point we were a host for the summer fire school here in Jeff City, and that was, I believe, for about 15 to almost maybe 20 years. We were the summer host of summer fire school. That was discontinued 2 years ago, and so they host that now in Columbia. And this burn building, this burn building, it could be can take on a lot of different forms, but it is something at some point we've got to address. We need to be able to do live fire training for our firefighters to maintain their skills in that capacity. Other things that are mentioned there, two-way radios. You know, we struggle with interoperability in terms of both portable and mobile radios. And this number is really just kind of a phase one number. There's a much bigger number. And we feel it's important for us to not only be able to communicate internally effectively, but also with other agencies. We routinely work, you know, with many other agencies. And to be able to do that, narrow banding, multi-banding, the multi-band radios are very expensive. This represents, I believe, 27 units at around $5,800 a piece. And I hate that they cost that much. And I wish there was another way around that, but that is the piece of equipment that is critical. And then if you look at various reports where things go bad, you know, radios are almost always something that is identified as a reason for a contributing factor to some of those things. So we feel that those radios, and they do have a lifespan, and it's something that you've got to continually make investments in to be able to remain current and be functional in that environment. So other items on that pink sheet list, I mean, there are many. And I guess maybe just open it up to questions. I don't want it to take up too much time for the committee, but happy to answer any questions on any of the other 13 items.
Any questions from the committee?
Yes, I have a question.
Councilman Graham.
I got the same question that I had for Chief Schrader. In regards to your sales tax G, what funds do you have available that can purchase any of these pink sheet request items?
There is some equipment money in the sales tax allocated to fire, and I believe that amount is right around $37,000 a year. We've let that money carry over a year or two. We're trying to. It helps us when we make purchases. At some point, we may either try to. We've got two things that are kind of under consideration right now. One is the radios, and that is something that we've considered. It's not enough to do the full phase one, like what we're talking about there. But we've also got a lot of hose that needs to be replaced. And those are kind of the two leading items that we are contemplating with that equipment money out of the sales tax funds. The other portion of our sales tax funds goes to the trucks and the truck replacement plan for the frontline fleet. And that money is allocated annually. And I'm sure Margie can speak to that if you have specific questions on
that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? Chief, any other remarks?
Probably not on the pink sheets. So I guess we'll move on if it's acceptable. Move on to the line items in the line item budget.
Sounds good.
As I think was probably stated previously, not a lot of changes really, maybe some minor adjustments up and down, but really a pretty steady state for most of these line items. I know one that you may question probably, while it's not a big dollar amount increase, it is a fairly significant percentage, was dues and publications. That went up, I believe, a little bit, and that money for us, I think it's about $800 difference in what was allocated to what we requested, and that was to buy additional books for the pending potential change in the code. We are optimistic that at some point in the next year or so, the city would update not only its building code but also its fire code. And if that were to occur, we try to buy products for to support that with our not only our inspectors, special inspectors, but also our company officers. So when they go out and do those company inspections, they have the most recent code book, quick reference guide to support them in that. So that's where that additional money would be used if approved. And then the other one that you might notice as well, if you go back too much into the historical line item history, would be medical claims and services. And so the question most people would probably ask is, why was it so much less in 2019? And the reason for that was we received a grant in 2019 that not only funded equipment for wellness and fitness in the stations, but it also supported our annual medical evaluations and to do enhanced blood work with that heavy metal blood testing that we needed to establish a baseline in 2019. So that was a federal grant that we had received in 18. We're able to apply it in 19. So that number may look low for that 1 year as a one-off. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have on the line items.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Chief, I'm not hearing any. Any final remarks from you?
Well, that was pretty quick.
Right, sir.
I don't think
Go
so.
ahead.
Not for me, unless there's anything else. You know, it's one of those things. I'm always happy to take a much deeper look, and I would welcome that anytime with anybody on the committee. I think there is a lot of context. Certainly, there's a lot of nuance to what we do and how we do it. And I would tell you that, you know, pack a lunch, because it might take an hour or two. So, but I'm happy to do it anytime, whenever anybody from the committee would like to do that.
All right, sir. Well, thank you for that offer and for your time this evening. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Well, we've been going an hour and a half strong here, and I'd like to get through as much of the remaining agenda as we can. But let's take a 5-minute break and let people stretch their legs. Some of us in our own homes, some of us at City Hall. And we will reconvene promptly at 7:05.
Right on.
you finished, Mark? No. Why? We just took a 5 minutes. We can get in there. Nope, we're going back. What? What do you need? I need my bedroom. I'm on the phone. I gotta go. I've got a meeting. I'm out there. I'm out there.
All right, 1 minute warning, everyone. All right, it is 5. We'll let everyone reactivate their cameras. And I'd ask if you're a council member, if you possibly can, to reactivate your camera, please, just so we have a sense that everyone's back and ready to roll.
I'm going until Steve. I'm unmuted. Oh.
Okay, we got some folks rolling back. All right, the next items up on the agenda are the public works budget. I see we have Mr. Marash and Mr. Smith in the room. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. Please feel free to proceed when you're ready.
Okay, I believe we're ready. Like I said, I got Britt Smith here, my partner in crime. So we should be able to answer about any questions, but basically on the public works budget, just to start off, I have a short PowerPoint for each division, so about 9 slides or so. But just overall, the budgets are much the same. They've been the last several years, only minor tweaks. You might remember last year, I think we already talked about there were, our goal was 7% cuts in the budgets. We've done better on that than others in some budgets, but what we basically do to put our budgets together, we look at the actuals for the last several years, and then we look at maybe any known adjustments or predictions we might have. One example might be, say, utilities. We know Ameren UE has a rate increase or something. We try to build that in. So that's kind of how we really go about putting our budgets together, realizing there's no, or unless the council may have a particular emphasis they want to improve upon. So several years ago now, I guess, there was a stormwater emphasis. And so we came up with a a plan for that, and that's in the budgets as well. So none of those this year that I'm aware of, but another interesting fact. So there's 10 divisional budgets in Public Works. Basically, roughly, give or take, probably more than 27 million operational capital funds we manage, and we have some overarching goals. One of the biggies there on the screen, the last one, is just talking about with our employees, talking about COVID-19, and so we can continue our essential services, and that's anything from, hey, you're getting, just reminding people constantly, if you're getting a headache and don't come to work, let's figure that out first, or so we don't go down all at once in one division or something like that, and they have to have a bunch of people quarantined. So that's one of our goals and challenges of the year. But one thing to look at as well, these budgets are pretty thin, pretty lean. We have a couple of divisions like admin division and our engineering division. They're basically all people, so 98%, 97% or whatever is salary line items, and the other couple percent is the basically paper and pens and things like that. If you look at all of our operational type divisions, central maintenance, streets, airport, parking, transit, those personnel costs, kind of an interesting look at it, but they hover between 46 and 62% is the personnel cost. So what they're doing is the other costs are actually putting money into whatever it is that division is responsible for. If it's streets, they're putting money into concrete and various things like that, or signals or what have you. So, cuts or accelerations in those budgets would go directly, besides the personnel items, go right into whatever they're responsible for. So feel free to stop me as we go. I noticed, so Public Works starts on basically page 207 and goes to page 307. So about 100 pages of budget here, so we can take as long as we need, but I'll try to move through it quickly, and please ask me questions as we go. And central maintenance is on page 208, and we can start there if everybody's ready. Sounds like it is. So just I tried to go through and just jot down a few items and give you the page number if you want to look at the budget. Have it here in front of me as well, but just kind of a feel for that, kind of going back to what we said about these are pretty thin budgets. So from 19 is our last actual numbers that are in the budget. So you can see the difference, almost no percentage difference over our to our 21 budget. And if you look at the budget and divide it up, again, about 50% of that budget is personnel. And if you add just the parts line item, which is the parts to repair equipment, cars, whether it's police car, fire truck, anybody's vehicle is in that budget, that parts number is 557. So if you add those two numbers together, it's 95% of your budget right there. The pink sheet, and that was unfunded in that division, was a shop truck. And if you look at that, we have an older vehicle. And basically what that does, we get call outs all the time from our mechanics to go out. We have a broken down vehicle somewhere, especially prevalent when it snows. You have a hose blow, so they have to run out and fix that. And so, and then I always try to, in all these sheets, try to have a little goal or what we're doing in that division. But really, you have an aging fleet here at the city. I think everybody's touched on that already, probably, or especially the Chief Schrader. But older equipment, more maintenance. So that's where we look at that parts budget a lot. Be happy to go over any particulars on that, or I can move on to the next one. The next budget, I didn't hear any question, but the next budget was Public Works admin. And I'll go through these pretty quick, but we can always go back and ask questions. But Public Works admin budget, again, 0.6 over the actual of 19%, 0.6%. 98% of that's personnel. There is one big chunk in there, gas for all of Public Works, $80,000. Of course, that's a guesstimate. We don't really know where that gas price is going, but Britt does a lot of voodoo math and tries to come up with that, but he looks at various websites and he can expand on that if need be. Try to predict that for the next year. Of course, we're doing it when we put the budget together probably 6 months ago now almost. And so, that kind of ebbs and flows, but it kind of is what it is. So no pink sheets in this. This budget is myself and two administrators, and and one Brenda Wunderlich, who you probably know from a lot of our committee meetings. And then we have our, for lack of a better term, our accounting type technician who handles pay sheets and all the various bills that come in that have to flow up to finance. So we have one person that kind of does that for the majority of our group. But again, just trying to keep, as far as a goal of what I'm about is kind of making sure we engage our employees and have good outcomes with our customers and internal and external. And then also, again, the COVID thing has really put a new kink in it for everybody, obviously. And so we're just trying to constantly, with a large workforce, remind folks of that. Take their question, I'd be glad to answer them. Or otherwise, I'll go to the next one. Engineering is the next budget in the book, page 219. But again, now this one's a little kind of a strange anomaly, but in 2019 to 21, there is a 7%. If you do the math on it, 7% increase there. I kind of tried to figure that out, and best I came up with, there is some insurance and retirement costs in personnel that seem to be a little different. I'm not sure why that is. We don't typically fool with that ourselves, but also back, I got to remembering then, back when we did the 7% cut, again, 97% of this is personnel. It's very difficult to get that 7% out of this particular budget. And I think we might have had to transfer some money back in. So that's kind of why the difference is there to catch up on our office supplies, basically. We did have one pink sheet in this one, something we found out there. Some newer technology that we haven't used. There's kind of a robotic survey equipment that basically allow one person to go in the field and do the survey work. We have two surveyors, a surveyor and his assistant. But during COVID, we found out trying to separate people, it would be nice if we could have a robotic station. I think it's in that 30,000, didn't pull it up, put it on there, but it's around $30,000, I thought. 23.5 to buy one of those, and we periodically have to replace our survey equipment anyway. But again, if we could find some extra funds, it'd be good to have that. And I know we applied for that through the COVID money.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, and several other items that we've talked about are been on the list of the COVID-related CARES Act funding that was submitted to the county, and they're still, I think, going through their process on how to consider funding. But yeah.
So if there's any particular questions on engineering budget. See any, go to street and stormwater, page 226. Again, 4.1% increase. Again, you look at this budget, it's about 55% personnel. And I kind of hit some of the highlights there, a couple lines down. Chemicals, that's our salt money that we spend treating the roads in the winter. So I think there's $300K in there for that. Material money, that 425, that's what buys the stone, concrete, asphalt, things like that our crews use. Pipe is in there, used to repair the street and stormwater system. It also repairs our signals, our signs, things like that.
Hey, Matt.
Those. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll jump in and ask about those two items. On the chemical side, the last 3 years for 143, 148, and 354, roughly, and C 300. I guess last year it was budgeted for 300 as well. How's the stockpile on chemicals look right now?
Let Britt answer that. But
we ended the year this year 700. What we try to do is budget such that we can be full at the end of each season. So we start the next year full, and then we budget for what our average usage is, which is about 3,500 tons. That's when it works out ideally. We ended this year actually 700 tons under. We didn't have enough funds to fill completely up. So next year we're actually had budgeted for, this budget request was based on 3,500 tons of plus the 700 to fill up what we call an early season fill. So that's where that number comes from.
Gotcha. And then on the street materials, on the materials line, so 362, 410, and 295, and then last year's budget was 425, and this year seeking 425. Do we have a reason to think we'll come anywhere close to that 425 on that area?
Well, I think the reason is basically we're very low on it right now. So what happens is, you know, it kind of depends on the condition of things, and our emphasis last few years have been really hitting stormwater hard, and then we still continue to do so. This year we've been hitting concrete street repair very hard, but you know, that eats up, so that concrete money eats it up pretty quickly. I think we're very low. We may even have to start shifting our focus here at the last couple months of the budget towards more manpower work, less cost work. And so we don't like to do that, but you know, that's just reality of budget. But
if I could, I think the other thing that happens, frankly, is if there's the need, we'd come back to council and we have a discussion. I mean, we've
done that in the past, actually.
Yeah,
but,
is not.
But right here at the end, you know, we still got a little money, but we're getting very close to spending it all. And I know there's big needs out there, especially on our concrete streets. So that's why one reason we kept it the same for sure. But in this goal for 2021, not only keeping our fleet up to date and trying to maintain that aging fleet, so you know we can respond not just to snow and ice, but also you throw in the tornadoes and floods we've been having lately. That was heavy on street equipment, and all of that is aging. I think we didn't put it in this presentation. We have a graph that shows how much we invest in equipment, and you know versus the age of our fleet, and we show that at Public Works Committee a lot. But you know, in the last several years, we haven't put a lot of money into the equipment. So what happens on the pink sheets here? I'm kind of getting off track of the question, but the pink sheets, we kind of looked, you know, anywhere between $600,000 and $800,000 of equipment. We could put more in there, and I think we were up closer to the higher end of it this year on our pink sheets. None of those were funded, by the way, but. And that's just a matter of, you know, the state of the budget. But at some point, there'll have to be an upgrade of that equipment as well. It's getting fairly aged. I want to go back to that concrete street repair. So anyway, it was kind of how it worked out. The mayor got a note from a citizen over, I think is in Ward 4, where it is over off Covington. We spent a lot of our summer in Covington Gardens subdivision repairing concrete streets. And so there are a lot of new patches out there, but we're still not finished. And the gentleman was asking, hey, you know, I see all this work going on down the street, and look at my street. And I'm going to probably talk about that a little more at a Public Works Committee meeting level. But again, I'm shocked that we haven't got more complaints about our concrete streets. We got a lot of joint raveling going on, so this eats a lot of money up. So one thing I was going to mention, if there are any extra funds or extra funds come in through whatever means, we think about maybe doing a contract for street repair, you know, add to that for our concrete streets. I think it could be fairly efficient to implement, but the street crews are out doing everything they can do and spending the money in this budget and going to spend it all up, but it just takes a lot of time, and we don't have that many crews available just to probably meet the level of what people might want to see in their neighborhoods. So just going to mention that. Got several other neighborhoods we know of that need it, and we worked over, like for example, on Scenic Drive earlier in the spring, and I think we made a lot of good progress there. So we kind of know the neighborhoods, and we're trying to get there, but it takes a lot of time to get there.
And I'd like to mention just a general point, because I think this kind of illustrates it. And one of the concerns I have is with some of the certainly COVID-related things and some of the things that are going on with the economy. I think we're going to start seeing prices increase, and you know, we certainly see increases in this area, but I think you're also going to see it in a lot of the kinds of things that we do, not only for supplies but also for equipment like vehicles. So I think that those are some costs that we're going to start seeing increase here in the next couple of years, certainly next year.
Also, Britt pointed out a good point there. On 2019, where it was down quite a bit, that's when we had those crews working on tornado cleanup and flood.
Right. We lost 2 months basically.
2 of our summer months were not spent doing street work, but doing cleanup. Now that's a good thing, because we didn't spend the money here, but it got us behind on our street repair. On the other hand, we're hopeful that we'll eventually get some money back for our workers putting in that time through the FEMA process. And I know Margie and her group's working on that. And, so hopefully the city will get some money back at some point on that. So that's kind of one reason that's down there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And sorry to derail your presentation.
No, not at all.
All right.
So,
Any other questions on that street budget before we move on?
well, I wonder, it seems like we're still having a lot of stormwater problems, but I don't see much in the budget about stormwater.
Okay, now there's two kinds of stormwater problems that people talk about. One is flooding, and that's probably our most recent. And last year, of course, the big flood from the river. But recently we had a flash flood.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that flooding is one avenue, but of stormwater issues. But then there's the other of just the pipes that we have in the ground are decayed and needing replaced. And so about how many years ago, you can probably see it in the budget, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, the council was good enough, made a big emphasis on stormwater, and instead of trying to implement any fees, our new revenue for that, they ended up putting 3 additional folks in the street budget to work on stormwater pipes. And I think that's been very good. We've got a lot of the local stormwater system replaced. And one of the ways we do that is we try to follow our next year's overlay, our anticipated overlay, replacing the inlets and the crossroad pipes. So you don't hear me talking about trash trucks falling through the street anymore, things like that, that you did a few years ago. But, and so those are kind of 2 different issues, but all revolve around stormwater. So the flooding's a whole different animal. I know we're going to talk about it at Public Works Committee this week. I have a lot of residents interested in that. But flooding a lot of times is related to the amount of rainfall and how structures are built, in close proximity to creeks or their elevation. And many times, unfortunately, that's a private property issue of how that's built. And people can apply for and pay for flood insurance, but your standard homeowners policies don't cover that.
Right.
And so, and you can get in a real bind and I feel sorry for folks that are in that bind, but again, that private property issue, where does the city stop and start? We try to hook them up with resources such as Catholic Charities. I know Red Cross, that were active in this last one. United Way, of course, helps organize all this. But so that, trying to say, okay, can those folks help maybe, with the electrical work even? I mean, they may or may not, it just depends how that works. But that can certainly help with debris removal, or I think they've been helping people take sheetrock out of their houses, things like that.
So oftentimes we have a design capacity for a system, and the flood happens and it just obviously just overwhelms it. It's not that the system isn't necessarily working, it's just not made for whatever that capacity may be.
Yeah, most cities across the country, they put in a 10-year system, 10-year pipe system, but they try to route the 100-year flows plus 1 foot. And we do that here, but this is on new development though. And so I'm not aware of any new development where the structures actually flooded, the home, or a business. So we implement our floodplain code, and that's on regulated floodplains. And, I'm using a lot of starting to use a lot of jargon here, but there's not, every creek has a floodplain, whether it's federally regulated or not.
Yeah.
We have a map of the entire city of those. And so we're going to talk more about that on some of the area over off Calvin Lane. Our stormwater master plan picked up that floodplain of that creek, although not regulated, where you would have to buy flood insurance if you had a home loan or something like that. But a lot of that area was regulated floodplain. So it's just, there's a lot of, it's very difficult to understand some of that, and be happy to answer any questions that I can if you have a particular one.
No, I don't. It just looks like the trend is going towards greater severity of these storms, and that's a concern, of course.
Yeah, and that's gets back to your flood resiliency comments and things like that. So you look at the airport, what's going on. We are rebuilding there, and I get that question a lot. Well, you're building it right back in a floodplain, but yeah, but it's going to be built back differently. The restaurant will be elevated, basically second story. It'd be an elevator that's flood proof. There's a lot goes into that. And then of course the banking insurance industry gets involved, and that's not my area of expertise, obviously, but it does have a big effect on it. So we, between streets that does the actual work and maintenance, and then we have engineers working on the actual regulation and review of those things, and planners both as new development comes in. That doesn't do much for existing homes that are, your older housing stock having issues, and we're flooded with calls trying to get back to people right now. It's a slow process. Every one of them is different. I would say most of them could be solved if folks were willing to invest some money in their structure and try to come in compliance with like floodplain regulations, even though it'd be a voluntary compliance, but we try to advise them on how to do that.
And I'd also just add that, a few years ago, we used to separate stormwater materials and street materials into two separate categories. And that got very difficult to figure, well, when you're buying concrete for an inlet, is that a street issue or is that a stormwater issue? So we lumped those together, and it's all in street materials. So when you see that street materials big number, recognize that is street and stormwater materials.
Yeah, and the one above it says stormwater material, but it's blank now, except in the last year there was $31 way out there at the end in 17 actuals, but it's all lumped into that number now.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Matt, on that same topic, it might be worth, your department has put together kind of an overall master plan. And I guess it's been a couple of years at Public Works, we looked at it. And I think at that time it was what, a $30 to $40 million comprehensive community plan to address. It just might be wise to share that with the council again, especially since Mr. Lester and Mr. Vogt are new to the council, so that they get kind of a full perspective of that your department kind of has a scope of the issue, and not necessarily to deal specifically with like the flash flooding issue, but that it's an aging system, and that we're trying, I think, to do our best to chip away at some of these projects. But there are some large scale projects that are still hanging out there that may need some addressing. I think of like, the study we did in the Satinwood area, the one over on Douglas Drive, that we funded the study, but we haven't necessarily come up with a funding source for the fix.
Correct. And as far as stormwater projects go, I didn't indicate, but our engineers implement the capital improvement side of that. There is some money in the CIP for that, capital improvement sales tax, and but again, it's not a lot of money. The numbers escaping me. I want to say 400,000, maybe Bert's saying 3. I can't recall exactly. Anyway, 300,000 or 400,000 over a 5-year period in that sales tax to address those larger projects that we bid out, and the 400,000 over 5 years. And so, for example, and then we try to look for grants. So the Douglas Drive actually has popped up, and we were able to get a grant for that to stretch our money further. And so, so that we're working on that. The engineers are putting the plans together and hopefully going to bid that this next year to go ahead and start. And it's really not the full project, I don't believe, but we're chipping away at it. But this grant has helped stretch our money over there on a part of that. But yeah, we can certainly talk about it at a Public Works Committee meeting. And I know we got a couple new folks on there, and it'd probably be good. We've talked about internally just kind of maybe each month picking a topic and just kind of going over it. The meetings get long anyway, but trying to just kind of give people a sense of what's going on with some of our various topics there. Oh yeah, and on this one, I'll let Britt, on the pink sheets, like I said, we have $800,000 plus of equipment on there, and we had to stop somewhere on that. None of that was funded. The standby pay plan, I'll let Britt talk about a little bit, something in a couple different budgets, but go ahead, Britt.
Right. And just to highlight that number one priority for us on the on-call plan, what we have is one street person, and I think it also affects a few other budget in Public Works, who's on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is a incentive for taking what we call taking the pager or being on call. The employee agrees to stay ready to respond to work at whatever time and hour. So they're staying in a work dress and et cetera. And they do that for a week. They're on for, they are reimbursed $8 a day, not $8 an hour, $8 a day for a weekday, and currently $20 per weekend day. That number hasn't changed in well over 20 years. We actually couldn't figure out when it actually was implemented, and it's never been adjusted for additional salaries, et cetera. And obviously that number is quite a bit behind from when it was implemented, just if it was just 20 years ago. We are recommended, we've actually discussed this at Public Works previously, but it didn't bubble all the way to the top, I don't believe, for whatever reason. But what we'd like to do is institute a plan where we just basically give a 1 hour of pay based on a street worker pay, 1 hour of pay per weekday, and then 2.5 times that on the weekend day. We anticipate the budget impact to be about $5,000 for the street department budget. And as I said, it's also echoed in the wastewater budget has a few items, and I think they put pink sheet in for those as well. We would I would personally really like to request the council's consideration for at least that item, understanding how tight budgets are.
Any questions about that? Hearing none. Okay. The next one's the airport budget, page 253. I think you got to skip through some basically capital improvement sales tax. It looks like type. Is that what that is, Mark?
They're not capital vehicles.
Just other stuff.
Yeah, it's just other stuff. But if you get back, page 253 is the airport budget. I was just trying to figure out how. There was a couple pages in between streets and that. But basically on the airport budget, move the slide. The total budget's less than it was in 2019, and that the primary reason for that really is our longtime director there again retired, and we replaced him just recently with somebody at a much lesser salary, and so it actually makes our budget less than a couple years ago. Of course, we took out depreciation, all those other things in the budget to equate those. And again, personnel is about 46%, so about half this budget is personnel. We have 3 people that run the airport, the manager and 2 workers, and they do generate some funding through rent and fuel. So a lot of that is farm leases, and then also leasing out space for private hangar space. And then fuel sales pays a fee to us as well. So this year, a little different about, I'm still not working in that second bullet point, but the general fund subsidy, there's always been a subsidy at the airport. Typically it's about $250,000. This year is $79,000. And that's due to using some flood insurance proceeds at the airport to fund this budget, since we now have the public-private partnership we're working on to build the new office space and restaurant, etc. Excuse me. Of that 79, to point out, there is an admin charge, like in all of this is a utility budget, so all the utility budgets are kind of accounted for on their own, if you will, and hopefully they can stand alone. Well, 2 of them don't, transit and airport don't, and so, but as a person, there's a calculation that's made to determine an administration fee, so you pay for the finance folks, the IT folks, legal, whoever that's helping manage these. And in this case, that admin charge is a little over $52,000. So some of the 79 turns around and comes right back in after the first of the year. So just point that out. Pink sheets on this one. We had some equipment we've actually figured out a way to fund recently through some of these insurance proceeds and things. And the only one left really, so you can X them. I think they're still in the budget though, but we're working through the process of doing that. And then, but we still need the back to all that Britt talked about, crew leader. We tried to basically, we just promote one of our maintenance workers to a crew leader, so somebody's kind of in charge of that. that kind of dovetails with how we work our other divisions, such as streets or wastewater or whatever. But Britt, I'll let you talk about that a little bit.
Right, and as Matt said, that's the number one item on our pink sheet list, the reclassification of that airport maintenance worker at a cost of a little less than $9,000 per year. We have a maintenance worker who's really serving in that role as we speak, on a day-to-day basis. But his current pay range is a senior airport maintenance worker. We believe and have for the last several years, those who've been on the council before have seen this before. We would really like to correct that, and it does provide, especially now that with the new airport manager still learning that job, if you will. We were very fortunate to find an excellent candidate, but he doesn't come with the experience that our previous airport manager had with 20-some years working here at the city. And so we believe it's even more important to have that appropriate chain of command, if you will, within that division. The other three pink sheet items, we have figured out ways to fund those through grants, sales tax, et cetera. So, we would appreciate any consideration on that first item.
So is there any other questions about airport? Seeing none.
Sorry, I'll jump in one question. And maybe you already touched on this. Professional services. It is about $5,000 over previous years.
Some of this are tower expense.
Yes. Yeah, we have a yearly expense. It's actually, we pay it monthly. We have a cost share, what's called a cost share tower, where the FAA pays a high percentage of it, and the city picks up, I believe it's 19% that we actually pay for the expense of operating that tower. The tower itself is the city's, but the operations of it are the people inside it.
Okay. So all those funds are fully committed then?
Yes.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted you to know that I was just making sure that that's what that was.
Yeah. No, anything else? I would go on to parking. And I'll go ahead and point out the same crew leader issue is in this division as well. Britt just explained it previously, but I highlighted here on the slide. Again, on this budget, page 266, now parking is one of the utilities that doesn't have any impact on general revenue, so it generates enough money through its fees and various things to support itself. And so you can see there's, this budget's a little different, being it's a utility budget, so we budget facility maintenance and things like that into the budget. And so this year the budget is 21% over the last couple of years actual, but a lot of that is for increased maintenance, say in parking lots or new meters and things of that nature. So it's hard to kind of compare. I didn't try to work all that out of there because it's kind of in various line items, but that's basically what it is. But if you look at it, about, again, 50% of the budget is about personnel. They generate, so the whole budget, even with the capital in, it's about $903,000. The revenue, little over almost 1.2 million. It pays a fee to the general fund, like I was saying, for its admin charge. This one happens to be about 163,000. Would mention but I didn't get an exact number, but the fund balance is plus or minus 4 million. Margie could probably tell us to the penny what it was audited at, but basically what's going on there is we're always generating a little bit extra in this division, so we're putting it away, and been able to keep up with our basically our capital needs as far as equipment and things like that. This year, Steve and I were talking the other day and noticed that, wait a minute, we didn't fund the pink sheets like we normally do in this division. And I think that was an oversight that I wanted to mention, and we'd hope we go ahead and fund those through this budget process. And we didn't have the crew leader in it because it does affect other budgets as well. But basically, at 4 million fund balance, we're pursuing at property acquisitions, currently working with property owners in the downtown area for construction of a new parking garage. And we think we're making some headway on that. So we're really hopeful to pursue that in 2021. And so there would be, some need for that fund balance finally, and it's long overdue. I think our current garage, if you've been in it lately, it needs a lot of maintenance. And but we're hopeful to get this new garage constructed where we can switch some folks around and then start maintaining that one a little better. And that'll be another big project we'll be undertaking after a new garage is constructed. But we are, well, probably more to come on that new garage, maybe the next council meeting or two, even because there's some negotiations we need to talk to the council about. So that's pretty soon. We'd want to talk to you about that. Any questions about this budget?
Anything from the committee? Nope. Please proceed.
Okay. The next one is transit. Page 276. So total budget on operations about $2.5 million, 1.2% over the 19 budget. Took out the capital and depreciation on that. The subsidy this year, I think we talked about this at the first meeting of the budget, but it's a much lower. It's typically around 1.2 million. It's about 600,000 this year. Again, 240 of that comes back to the admin charge, back to the goes in and out on that subsidy. Personnel, again, around that 50% mark. It's a little higher than some of the others. Probably primarily just due to the number of staffing we have to run these buses. Theirs is a little less flexible. And so, but still in that range of about 50% personnel, because the rest of it goes into their operations of the bus. Revenue, that's not a grant. We generate about $200,000 in non-revenue or non-grant revenue, and that's basically people paying to ride the bus, $1 a ride. And there's various levels of ridership costs based on, many things. And that's been down obviously a little bit lately due to the COVID issue. And the reason the subsidy is down again, we got the $2.3 million grant from the feds on this to keep our system running. And that's probably a 2 to 3 year process, we think, to get that monies back. So I think we budgeted the 650,000 this year. Coming up in this budget, and so that's why that is reduced there, as you see, from the typical subsidy, and we think that'll continue for at least the next couple years.
Yeah, so ordinarily we would have general fund kind of subsidizing that, and then with this money that doesn't need to occur, which makes the general fund look a little bit better and frees up a little bit money there. But as Matt said, 3 years down the road-ish, we're going to kind of be back. So we need a longer term solution here.
You have to answer any questions on that budget? And there's no capital, so we don't typically do pink sheets here because many times we can get grants for our, especially our small bus replacements. We've really worked hard lately on getting grants for, say, where you can look at your cell phone and tell where the bus is. We just working on one where you can just pre-buy your pass online on your phone and show the driver your phone and get on the bus that way. And so we're really trying to enhance some of those things. We can even our facilities. We got grants for garage door replacement garage doors there. And I didn't put it here, but we got kind of distracted with the COVID thing. And that basically we're using it for operations. It could cover a lot of things, but our facility, as many of you have been there, very old, in need of replacement. So we're kind of working through Campo to look at funding a facility plan and look at potentially getting help, again, getting some grants to help maybe with a new facility somewhere. And what that does for us, our central maintenance folks are housed in transit that work on everybody's stuff, but transit grants paid for those facilities. So we're hopeful that we can improve, get a facility that's much improved to keep doing a similar thing that we've had done many, many years now. But more to come on that. Any questions on that one? getting close. Wastewater is the last budget. I'll go to the next one. And page 284. So wastewater utility actually has 3 budgets: admin, collections, and treatment. But I kind of lump them all together because it's all our wastewater utility, another utility that generates all its own funds. And they do have a good fund balance. It's 20+% last I looked, and I'm sure Margie could tell us the exact number, but just went through that bond refinancing. So I don't recall the exact number off the top of my head, but generally our utility brings in about $12 million. Approximately 6 of that goes out to bond payments. The other half goes into the actual operations and salaries of our system. We have other funds restricted due to bond covenants and all that. It gets fairly technical in a hurry on some of this stuff, but one thing to note, we haven't had a rate increase since 2017. So just like American Water or Ameren UE, they've all had rate increases, kind of annually. Well, we had a program where we went through a big bond capital projecting, or we did a lot of capital projects through bonding, and that had a rate increase through 2017. So right now we've started our new rate study to look at that and look at our upcoming expenses as far as equipment and facility replacements, regulatory expenses, all those kind of things. And so we're working with a consultant that did the last rate study to look at where we need to go with that. And so that'll be coming to the council in this next year. But again, no rate increase in this budget yet. Pink sheets, those are funded through our fund for wastewater fund. And we did include the standby pay in this one as well. So that one wasn't funded because it does affect other budgets, but we'd like some consideration there. But now this is a good example of utilities, and this is me talking, of course, but utilities typically where you can have some flexibility as a council to adjust the rates and keep up with your cost. That's a very good model. Obviously, we do that in wastewater. We have a healthy, nice fund balance that, if an emergency comes up 20+%, we can react. We can borrow money to keep the rates low still, but and all the while keep it funding our equipment replacement. And so each of our divisions, we've produced a life cycle plan. Britt was one of the main authors of that. But all the divisions have done it, including wastewater. So as a truck, this type truck gets 10 years old. We look at the mileage and the use and see if we need to replace that or can it wait a couple of years, things like that. So we're trying to keep up with that plan. We've done a good job in wastewater of that by funding these pink sheets this way. So that's what the other divisions that aren't funded, that's what they're trying to do. But wastewater is a good example of actually doing it. So the goal for 2021 really here is to finalize our financial study and look at those rate adjustments and then to keep up with the system. Yeah, if you try to answer any questions on the wastewater budget.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee?
That's my last budget if there's no questions.
Hearing none. Gentlemen, thank you very much. So we have,
thanks.
So on the agenda is the parks budget.
That's me.
Todd's on there. Oh, he's on there.
Okay.
Oh,
You guys can do it.
All right, here you go. Yeah, that's all right.
everyone hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine. Whenever you are ready, sir.
Well, thank you all. I'll try to keep mine brief. I know you all have had plenty to do, and the staff and commission has taken a lot of time on this year's budget, and we did some committee work and also spoke about it from the commission. They did approve it at the July meeting, and then it goes before you all as well. The 21 budget is, for us, very similar to our last 3 years. No real big changes. The one thing I will say that as we move forward, like so many city departments with a high percentage of our staff costs or a high percentage of our expenses and staff costs, we're trying to be as ready to move if things go different directions, right? So we had quite a few positions that retired, the folks that retired, and so we're kind of keeping quite a few of those positions there to kind of see how we move forward and see what happens, so we can be aware, because we have a lot of revenue that's pretty aware, people that come in and people that do programs and all those things. And so during these times, that certainly we've seen a bit of a decline. Really, a couple of just the differences from this year and from last year. We did some technology improvements. We needed to do some more service agreement type things with all of our fitness equipment at the link with Lincoln University. And a lot of our, budget has to do with a lot of part-time staff too. So we saw, pretty good increases last year and this year with the minimum wage increase. And we've dealt with that, I think, very, very well. So really that's it. We have, as you know, in a completely separate of our operating budget that you all are here to talk about tonight, but we have the park projects that are going along with the bonds that you all approved last year. So we're dealing with that, I think, in a very positive manner as well. So that's really, like I said, not many increases at all, not doing a lot of capital things this year because of the bonds. We're trying to remain flexible and fluid. We do have some ideas for at least one or two of those positions to fill this year, but look a little different than they have in the past. So we'll be prepared for that coming up soon. So that's really all I have. The budget on the budget. It's really, like I said, not very different. So if there's any questions about specific things, I'll try to answer those.
Any questions from the committee?
Todd, this is Ken, just making sure. I've looked at your budget, and it looks like for bond payments, things are working out fine. You're not seeing any issues. I guess I worry about parks as a department when it came to COVID with the cancellation of a lot of things, and that's a revenue stream coming in for programming, for summer camps, for pools. You're not worried about this fiscal year being off in any way, or?
No, Ken, I think, it's going to be a little bit, but I think we've held our expenses in check real nicely. A lot of the programs that we do that we had to cancel, and especially in that 2-month time back in the spring, a lot of those are managed by our part-time seasonal staff. So while they suffered a bit, it didn't, keep our expenses in line. I think we're doing fine. We came back strong. The thing that we kept talking about as a staff during that time is that it's like, when we're able to go ahead, when we're able to go with, and we've been able to accomplish summer camps, some semblance of them anyway, and some tournaments, and the rules have been operating since we've kind of got the green light, and we've done remarkably well, I think, combating this. So, yeah, I'm always a little nervous because we are so obviously employee heavy, and we do rely on a lot of revenue, not only from sales tax, but from programs that we do. So certainly, but I do think we're pretty safe. Luckily, the last few months, obviously, sales tax revenues have been strong, so that's been helpful too.
Great, thank you. Just making sure, because I know, COVID has wreaked havoc on a lot of providers of summer camps and sports programming, and it's very unsteady. So that's good news to hear.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Well, Todd, thanks for your time. Thanks for the information and for hanging in there with us tonight.
You bet.
All right. All right, the final item on here is miscellaneous budget. Someone presenting on that?
In your budget book, we've got the sales tax G, the capital improvement sales tax that I was just gonna run through a couple of those line items. It begins on page 317. So we normally estimate around $5 million a year coming in from the capital improvement sales tax. And on page 318 is the individual line items that outline the projects for the capital improvement sales tax for 2021. So we've got $587,500 for the parks facilities rehab, the fire equipment, $37,500. The chief had mentioned earlier. For the police department, original request of $120,000 under field operating equipment, and the PD information systems improvement of $20,000. That $140,000 was what the mayor used then. Instead of funding those two lines, she put it to the police vehicles that appear online on page 317, the page before that. And then Britt Smith mentioned the stormwater improvements, the $360,000 a year that go toward that out of the capital improvement sales tax. Then 1.220 out for the city county cooperative projects, and 1.2 for the street resurfacing. 60,000 for some local road studies and grant match. 60,000 for neighborhood sidewalks, and then IT GIS is 85,000 a year. And then 550,000 is for contingency projects. So that is the bulk of the capital improvement sales tax budgeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee? Hearing none. Margie, thank you so much.
But there's toward the end of the book, after the parks, are some small funds that the city has. I won't go through those unless there's any interest in that. One of the ones that does have activity, though, is the lodging tax fund, and I think we discussed that when we talked about revenues earlier, where the city collects the sales tax or the lodging tax, and then distributes it to the chamber and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, but keeps a small portion of it as admin fee. But unless you have any questions under those small funds, starting on page 392. Those are the miscellaneous funds.
All right, any questions or comments from the committee? All right, thank you so much. Well, I just want to thank staff, first of all, for getting all of this finished in 2 meetings, 2 pretty long meetings, but great presentations, great information and answers to questions. And thanks also to everyone on the council for hanging in there also. So we have, we had originally scheduled a meeting for this Thursday, which will no longer be necessary, so we'll cancel that meeting for the 13th. But we have a lot of work to do, each one of us, before our next meeting on the 20th. Let's take this this time to study the budget some more, really identify our top priorities, and try to work out a way to fund as many of these important items as we possibly can. So at our next meeting on the 20th, it'll be a council conversation about the budget. And as we mentioned a little while ago, we will start with a discussion of potential additional revenues, mostly on the public safety side. So does anyone else have any questions or comments before we wrap it up?
So the meeting on the 20th, is that in person? Or?
That will be in person. Yes, thank you. That'll be in person in the council chambers. Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll call this adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.